Now that you are up and running with your new Linux installation, it's a good idea to take a tour of the system and just explain what everything is. And if you're new to Linux, pretty much everything here is going to be new. Now, what differentiates Linux distributions from one another is usually what desktop environment they ship with and which default applications they have installed. In the case of Ubuntu, it uses the GNOME desktop environment, but I'm not here to show you how to use this specific desktop. I'm here to show you how to use Linux. And for that, we're going to have to open up a terminal by pressing Ctrl-Alt-T. Now this is where you can really get into the nitty-gritty of Linux. But before we get going, I want to make some minor adjustments to the desktop, just for convenience. So I'm going to click up here, and you can click on Settings. And again, this is not specifically a Linux thing, this is the GNOME desktop environment. I'm going to set it to dark, because I just find it easier on the eyes. And I'm going to click Auto Hide the Dock, so when we maximize the terminal window, this big bar on the side will disappear. So you can explore these settings if you want, but we don't need to touch them any more than this. So I'm just going to close that down and maximize the terminal window. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger by pressing Ctrl plus, like that. So at this point, some of you are probably thinking, oh man, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. This is all scary. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it. Now, when you open up a terminal like this, you are placed in your home directory. See this blue squiggly sign here? That means you're in the home directory. And directory is specifically for your user. So as you can see on this prompt here, I am Joseph, that's my username, at Ubuntu 01, which is the name of the computer. And here we have the blue sign here that just says I am in my home directory. So let's start out by seeing what's in my home directory. And you navigate this terminal now by typing commands and pressing enter. So I'm going to issue the ls command, which will list all of the contents of the current directory that I'm in. If I want to get the full path to the directory that I'm in, I can issue the command pwd, which stands for present working directory. And you see here that this path says /home/Joseph. And in Linux, the root of the file system begins at slash, like that. So I'm going to go there right now and see what's in there. So I'm going to give the cd command, which is for change directory, and then after that, and put a space in between, I tell it where I want to go. And I want to go to slash, which is the root of the file system. And now that we've issued a couple of commands, the terminal starts to get a bit cluttered. It's not so bad just yet, but you can at any point press Ctrl L to clear the screen and move the line to the top. If you're not familiar with the term root, it is essentially the base of the operating system. This is where everything begins and the rest of the systems spread outwards from there. Let's look at what's in this directory right now. So if I type ls in the root directory, we have a bunch of folders. We have the bin folder, which is system executables that any user on the system can use. We have dev over here, which is actually interfaces to all the devices connected to your computer. We have the boot directory, which contains information and programs that load the operating system on startup. Um, and we have MNT, which is the mount points for all of your system disk partitions. I'm not going to go through all of these, and you will learn most of what these folders do as you go along. You don't have to memorize all of these immediately. I just want to show them to you so that you have a basic idea of what the root of the system looks like. But then here you see this one called home. And if you remember, when we were in the home directory and started up, the path was /home/Joseph. So let's go into home from here. cd home. And whenever you type the name of a folder or a file or a command, you can press tab and it will try to autocomplete it for you. So let's see what's in the home directory. Type ls, and there's just a folder called Joseph. So I'm going to go back into that one, cd, and I just type jo, and then I press tab, and it will autocomplete it for me. cd/Joseph. And now we are back home. So let's explore the home directory a little bit. I think most of these folder names will probably be self-explanatory, and Linux doesn't really care about whether or not you're putting your documents in your music folder or your pictures in your videos folder. It's just that these folders are named like this for convenience. And it, of course, helps with organization if you generally put the relevant things in the right folders, but there's nothing technically wrong with doing it the way you want. So let's explore one of these folders and see what we have. For example, documents. Oh, gives me a little ping there. CD documents. And there's nothing in here, which makes sense. I mean, we haven't done anything. Um, so to get back to your home folder and back out of the folder you are in, there are two ways you can do this. You can type cd dot dot, which will take you up one folder. In this case, that is back in the home directory. Or if you type cd, wherever you are in the system, it will take you back home. So for example, let's see that I go to /boot, like that. And now I'm at somewhere else in the system and there's nothing for me to do here. I can just type cd and it will take me back home. Throughout all of this, when we enter these commands, what we are doing is that we are giving commands to a program called a shell. Then in the next video, I'm going to go over this shell called bash and explain all of its most important functions and how you can use it to chain different commands together. But for now, I'll just go over the rest of the basic navigation. So far, you've learned how to do ls to list the contents of the current folder. You've learned how to use pwd to show you where you are. You've had a look at the root file system and the folders therein. You've learned that you can use cd to go back to your home directory, and that you can use Ctrl-L to clear the terminal screen whenever it gets cluttered. So this covers the basics of moving around and navigating the file system using the terminal. But I want to show you some more interesting things you can do that can give you a bit of extra information or sort of expand on the capabilities of these commands that I already showed you. Now remember, if you type ls and just input that command, it will just give you the files and the folders in the directory that you're currently in. But if you give it some flags or arguments, as they are called, you can actually expand upon its functionality by giving it some extra instructions. For example, I know the ls command takes an argument called -l, which will tell it to do a listing in a long format. So let's do that. And you get this input, or output rather. Now this is a little interesting. Here, this first column, it shows D, which means that it is a directory. And then all of these bits show who has permission to read, write, and execute this item. In this case, it is a desktop folder. It also shows the users and groups who have ownership of that and the timestamp of when they were last accessed. In my case, the last time I touched these were September 19th at 6 o'clock. I'm going to show you more about user permissions and groups later, but for now, just keep in mind that this is a useful command for you to gain some extra information. Another thing about the home directory is that there are hidden files in here. There's actually a lot more in this folder than what we see here. If you want to see that, we can type ls-a for all, in which case it will show all the files and folders in here, not just the ones that are marked as visible. So that's a little interesting. We get more items here. You can see there is a file called bash history, bash logout, .config, .local, and all of these files or folders are called dot files. And that little dot in the front there, that prefix, is what actually marks them as hidden. But we can actually combine these two commands, so ls-la. So after the dash, you just follow it with the letters that you want to supply as an argument. So here we are saying that I want the long listing. I want to show all of them. And also we can add a third flag, which is H, for human readable file sizes. So instead of writing it in, I don't know which format it is it bits? Something like that, or bytes? We can actually show them in a human readable format. So let's do that. Now it's a bit more nicely formatted and readable. You remember this column before just said 4096, but now it shows us that this is 4.0 kilobytes, which is this current folder. I'm not sure if this is actually everything in this folder. That doesn't maybe make sense to me. Uh, I'll have to look into that. But this is a useful combination of commands to show you a more detailed view of all of the items in the current folder. But now the screen is getting a bit cluttered, so I'm going to clear that up. There's one last thing I want to talk about before I close out this lesson and move on to talking more about the terminal and the bash shell. Remember when I said that you can use the Ubuntu Software Center or App Store, whatever they call it, to install software? Well, the preferred way to do that in pretty much every Linux distribution is to use their command line package manager. Since Ubuntu is based on Debian, which uses the apt package manager, Ubuntu also has this command line apt package manager. And this is generally the preferred way of installing software and updates to your system. So I'm going to go over how to use that. Let's say, for example, that we wanted to install Vim. If it's not already installed on the system, we're going to need it later. So I'm going to type in the command to install that. And to run any command, you just type in the name of the command, or if you're running a program, you just type in the name of the program. And really, commands are just programs, actually, or executables. So the program we want to use is apt, and we want to give it an instruction. In this case, I know that apt has an instruction called install, and then I want to give it the name of the program that I want to install. In this case, I want to install Vim, which is a terminal-based text editor. So I press enter on that, and you see when you enter this command, you get an error. Could not open log file, permission denied. And here it asks me, are you root? So what does this mean, root? Remember that I mentioned before that the root of the file system is the, well, the core of the computer, or rather the starting point for the entire Linux file system here. But there is also a user account on every Linux system called root. This is essentially the administrator account, which has access to all of system functions and can do everything. The reason that you are getting this error now is because your user is not root. You are not the administrator. There are two ways you can get around this. Either you log in as the root user with the su command and then you enter the root password, but a more common method to do this is to enter the sudo command. This means that you are doing the following command as a super user, or rather with root privileges. And when we install this Ubuntu system now, we included our own user as, well, in the list of users who can use sudo to enter their passwords and gain super user privileges when running commands. So we can run that command again, sudo apt install vim. And at this point, it will ask me for my password. So I will enter that. And then it will proceed with the installation. Now it asks me, do I want to continue? The answer is Y for yes. And there you go. Installing new software via a package manager is just that easy. It takes care of all of the dependencies for you and it puts all of the files in the proper place so that you don't have to think about it. Now, depending on your settings, that maybe took a little while. For me, it took around a couple of minutes, so I just sped up the footage there. But if you install this properly on your real host machine, it's usually quite quick, unless your computer is rather ancient. All of this software available to you resides in a so-called repository, a giant database containing the files and the names of all of these programs that you can install. And if you're not sure what the name of the program is, you can of course search. So apt search and the name of something, let's say Python 3. And it will give us a list of all matching programs with the name Python 3. So this that is highlighted in green here is the name for the package. So if you wanted to download, whatever this is, a plugin for Python 3, you type on sudo apt install and then the entire name of that. But I'm not going to install that right now, so I'm not going to do it. But that's how you go about doing that anyway. In order to update already existing software on your system, whether that is programs or drivers or libraries that other programs use, your package manager can take care of that for you as well. So to do that, you type in sudo apt update, and right after that, you can add these two ampersand signs to say that you want another command to follow, and in that case it is sudo apt upgrade. Now, since this is the first time you are updating your system after this new installation, this is going to be quite a hefty installation. For me, when I did this, it took me about half an hour. However, do note that whenever it is updating, you can just minimize the terminal and continue to use your system as normal. This is something you probably missed from using Windows if you come from that sort of background, where it just tells you that you need to upgrade and then it just sits there forever. In Linux, that is not the case. You can just update and let it sit in the background and you don't need to worry about it. And when it is done, you don't always have to reboot your computer. It's sometimes a good idea to do it, but you don't have to. That being said, I'm going to tell you now that you don't have to update your computer at this time. But it's probably a good idea to do it at some point. Just be aware, since it is the first time you're doing it, it's going to take a while. But I think that just about covers the basics for getting familiar with your new Linux system. So before I move on to the next video, I want to give you a short exercise. You see on top of here at the GNOME terminal, if you go to Preferences, you see here on the sidebar there's something called Profiles. Now the first one, called Unnamed, is just your default profile, but all of this contains some customization options for your terminal. Throughout the rest of this course, we are just going to be spending time in the terminal, so you're going to spend a lot of time looking at it. And when you spend all of your time looking at a terminal, you want it to look nice. So, before I leave this video, I want to give you an exercise, which is to customize your terminal to your liking. Now, this is specifically the GNOME terminal that is customized like this. There are many other terminals that are customized only through text files, but this one has a graphical interface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new profile. I'm going to call it Joseph. And here you can set all different kinds of settings, such as the font, where you can click that and select something else. You can go ahead and select the cursor shape, which could be a block or an I-beam. And here you can set the colors. So if you uncheck Use Colors from System Theme, I'm going to start with a black on white, or rather a gray on black, I think, and use that as the starting point for my profile. And down here, you can see all of these color swatches, and you can set these to whatever you want. It's generally a good idea to keep them within the same general hue. Like, you don't want your red color to be green or something like that, because most programs are configured to read from what your red setting on your terminal is. But you can adjust this within reason as you want. And if you want to change it to something completely different, that's not technically incorrect. It's just that formatting on some terminal output may not look as intended. So, this is your little exercise. Go ahead and customize your terminal so that it looks nice and it looks the way you want. And then when you're done, we're going to come back in the next video and I'm going to teach you all about the bash shell.